The preface and last chapter of Companionate Marriage from 1929. By Judge Ben B. Lindsay and Wainwright Evans. Preface. Companionate marriage is legal marriage with legalized birth control and with the right to divorce by mutual consent for childless couples, usually without payment of alimony. Companionate marriage is already an established social fact in this country. It is conventionally respectable. Sophisticated people are, without incurring social reproach, everywhere practicing birth control and are also obtaining collusive divorce, outside the law, whenever they want it. They will continue the practice and no amount of prohibitive legislation can stop them. My thought is that we should put an end to this hypocritical pretense, under which we profess one thing and do another, that the companionate marriage, now largely monopolized by educated people who understand scientific contraception and who can employ skilled lawyers in the obtaining of collusive divorces, ought to be made legally and openly available to all people, particularly to the poor and the socially unfit, who need it most. Scientific contraception promises what may develop into the most revolutionary change in human affairs that history has ever recorded. It would be difficult to overstate the economic, the eugenic, the broad social significance of a discovery which is even today changing marriage in some of its most fundamental aspects. Birth control has brought the companionate into existence. It has made possible between men and women a relationship which has never before, in the history of the world, been practicable for multitudes of people. To protest against this colossal phenomenon is like trying to stop the tide by scolding it. I suggest that if we rationalize this new thing and use it intelligently, we may be able to derive from it a degree of social and spiritual power capable of creating for our descendants a better world than we have been able to fashion for our own use and happiness. I am putting my explanation into a preface because I want, so far as possible, to forestall misunderstanding and prejudice on the part of readers who have been told by ill-informed critics of my views that I advocate men and women living together in free love unions, without marriage, and that they should remain in that unmarried status till the birth of a child. Another version is that one advocate trial marriage. What these critics mean by trial marriage, apparently, is a technically legal marriage which is entered with the intention that it shall be, not an enduring union but merely a temporary sex episode, similar in spirit to what we commonly call the unmarried union. The parties to a trial marriage would be marrying, that is to say, strictly on a basis which would emphasize the trial element in the union and create in it a psychology of impermanence. The very name trial marriage indicates this, and it suggests to those who believe that marriage should be as permanent as possible, the thought that persons so doubtful as that of their ability to remain married, had better not marry in the first place. An unmarried union would suit the needs of such couples better than any sort of legal union, one would think. The fact is that the distinction between trial marriage and free love is nominal. A trial marriage is really a free love union which avails itself of a legal form. I am not here concerned to criticize it. One merely insists on this identity between free love and trial marriage, and I further insist that free love and trial marriage are by no means to be confused with companionate marriage. Technically, the companionate and trial marriage have certain features in common, but one is not the other. Both would normally avail themselves of birth control and divorce by mutual consent. Both would place a minimum of obstruction in the way of childless couples wishing a divorce. And both recognize the fact that when men and women marry they can never be perfectly certain that their marriage will turn out to be a permanent success. But there the similarity ends. For the emphasis, the psychological emphasis, is altogether different. All men and women who are sensible and honest know when they marry that there is at least a possibility of failure ahead. But they assume that the chance is remote. They have confidence in their ability to weather all storms and make port. It is their intention to do that and to make such adjustments as may be necessary to that end. That is marriage. That is the spirit of marriage. It involves the same recognition of risk that goes into trial marriage, but it stoutly proposes to overcome and nullify that risk. It emphatically does not propose to seek divorce the moment the flame of romantic passion begins to cool. Now the trouble with this attitude in ordinary marriage is that not enough account is taken of the risk. If the trial marriage psychology puts too much emphasis on the risk, the psychology of traditional marriage bullheadedly ignores it altogether. The result is that couples who make a mistake in their choice of each other find that in getting into marriage they have walked into a trap. There is room for sane compromise between these two extremes. Men and women who enter marriage should be encouraged to do it under conditions that would best ensure the success and permanence of the marriage, but which would also afford a line of retreat in case the marriage failed. They should not have children, for instance, till they have been married long enough to be reasonably sure of their ability to carry on together, and they should not have them till they can afford them. This is common sense. It is not free love or trial marriage at all. It may, as I have indicated, have a technical similarity to trial marriage, but legal technicalities are not what make a marriage. What makes a marriage is the spirit and intent of it. And the companionate as described in this book is genuinely, if not technically, a different thing from trial marriage. I do not deny that it would be possible for people to enter the companionate, with the trial marriage psychology. But so is it possible for them to enter traditional marriage with the trial marriage psychology. Some do it, but they are not many. For such persons the unmarried union, achieved secretly, is easier and involves less responsibility before society. The companionate would not invite many such persons. Nor, since it would offer small hope of alimony, would it attract ladies of the gold digger type. It would give marriage a chance to breathe and live, it would give it room in which to grow, it would give it soil in which to put forth roots, and it would establish it on a better basis than it has yet known. This book, like The Revolt of Modern Youth, has been written in collaboration with Wainwright Evans. Mr. Evans has contributed to this book more than his skill as a writer. He has brought to the work a mind which is strongly in agreement with my views. His wholehearted sympathy with what I am trying to do has given him a penetrating, almost an instinctive insight into the deeper implications and meanings of the principles on which I have done my work in Denver, and he has thus made articulate much which might otherwise have gone unsaid. In short, Mr. Evans has put a creative effort into this book which, along with the effort of my own mind and my own unique fund of experience, has made the whole thing possible. Chapter 15, Our Unweeded Garden of Eden. I have a profound conviction that what may seem radical in this book will be the conservatism of tomorrow. I am now on the far side of 50, and yet I expect to see within my lifetime most of the changes of code and conduct suggested in these pages. Some will take longer than that, but they will take. What I have tried to do is to reduce to understandable terms certain as yet hardly crystallized feelings and social tendencies which many persons stand in dread of because they misinterpret them and have never defined them in a constructive and hopeful way. It is immoral to be afraid of reality, to distrust the truth is the ultimate infidelity, intolerance is the ultimate cowardice. I detest that inane question asked by orators who lack ideas and would fain conceal their empty-headedness: whither are we drifting? They ask. But why drift? And how do they know we are drifting? Life seems a very purposeful thing to me. At all events, we must go forward, whether we fear to do so or not, and we have now reached a point where we should be able to do something more than float like jellyfish on this moving flood of change. My friend Luther Burbank told me that he was able, by rationalizing the life and propagation of plants, to accomplish in a few plant generations what nature, without such rational aid, would not have attained short of many thousands of years of trial and error. Burbank believed that results far more marvelous than his horticultural miracles could be attained by the human race in a few generations if it could but summon the moral courage and the scientific insight, to rationalize human life and the propagation of that life. Even a little such rationalization, he believed, would work, perhaps in the span of a man's life, a greater miracle of human advancement than the whole of recorded history can show. He had no program for this. But I think his idea was that we might advance rapidly along that road if every school child in America could be given an adequate insight into the ways and laws of nature through some such scientific training as he would himself have imparted to a child he undertook to educate. Such a training in the art of living as Luther Burbank would have imparted to children, would, I feel sure, be capable of breathing the breath of life into our present system of education. Our culture lacks a scientific base. Consequently, it teaches people everything but the thing they most need to know how to live, the art of living. This is another way of saying that by laying emphasis on the authority of fact, Burbank would have introduced an emotional content into the system of chilly abstractions which we are pleased to call education. He dealt with realities, and he detested hazy thinking. I think Burbank would have taught the essentials of biology first, that he would first have let the child listen with his own ears to the beating of the great heart of nature, and that he would have builded the child's life and character on that first-hand knowledge, instead of on systems of mythology. He had builded his own life on that, and he was himself as fine and subtle as light. Burbank knew how great were the possibilities of human life, if it could only be liberated by science, because, more than any man I have known, he felt them in himself. His was the cogito ergo sum, the I think, therefore I am of Descartes. It was all a matter of first-hand inner experience with him. There were depths within him into which he himself could only gaze and wonder. For instance, he could walk down a row of young trees, none of which had ever fruited, and choose infallibly those which were superior to their fellows, and years later these trees would prove their superiority over others that an ordinary man would have said were just as good. None of the people working with him, no matter what their knowledge and skill, could do this. He had a touch faculty they did not possess. It may be that he was the only man in the world who had it. In all his contact with life around him and within him, he saw with crystal clearness and with apparently absolute intuitive knowledge what might be. It was this that made an hour of his company like a glass of cold water to a desert traveler. Here was a measure of infallibility such as no ecclesiastical authority in history ever had, a thing mysteriously final and authentic. We could, if we would, accomplish within a few generations, improvements in the average level of humanity, physical, mental and moral, as miraculous as anything he himself had ever wrought with his Shasta daisy, his Burbank plum, or his thornless cactus. Men now living might see at least the beginning of this upsoaring of the human spirit before they died. About us lies the world, an unweeded garden of Eden needing the touch of creative geniuses like him. Ah, if he could have grown for us a garden of them, as he grew his plants, before he died. He was hounded to his death till he broke by yokels who called him an atheist. If they had known what he might have done to shorten the snouts of their progeny by means of a little selective breeding, the fury of their attack would have been redoubled. They were quite right when they said that none of them had descended from monkeys. The traveling of them and their kind had all been done on a dead level. But to the everlasting credit of America and of the civilized world, be it said that the great human race took him to its heart and loved him. The others are best forgotten. My contact with Luther Burbank confirmed and crystallized in my mind certain beliefs I had always had about people and about the possibilities of the right sort of education if we had it. I have never been a eugenics crank, though my belief in eugenics itself is profound. I don't think, for instance, that we can legislate a human stud farm into existence to improve the human stock by confining mating and procreation to picked specimens, as Burbank did with his plants, or as an animal breeder does with his stock. Oh, there can be nothing of that sort. Probably it would be intolerable if there were, and the first thing our improved progeny would do, probably, would be to knock every stud farm type of eugenics firmly and decisively on the head. I can imagine, as readily possible, however, a race so educated in biology and in every science closely allied to it, that it would possess a quickened scientific imagination which would confer on the average man as intense a repugnance of unfit parenthood as we would now feel with respect to the marriage, say, of a brother and sister. I can imagine biological science getting the truths and the facts of life as deep into the marrow of our bones as that. I can imagine science conferring on us a conception and an ideal of human life and of human loveliness, that would be more effective in improving the human stock than all the legislated eugenics ever put on paper. I can imagine a code of voluntary conduct based on such ideals, and I think such a code would give us a moral faculty capable of keeping pace with the growth of scientific knowledge. I also think that if we do not acquire some such morality as this, science, divorced from ethics, may quite possibly destroy our present civilization. One world war is a sufficient hint of what another scientifically fought war might be like, say 50 years from now. I can imagine, too, a society that so recognized the need for leadership and light, the need of the world for geniuses to lead it, that it would breed its geniuses intensively, as Luther Burbank produced the precise apple or plum or apricot, or plumcot that he wanted. But not while things are run by the type of people who hounded Luther Burbank to his death. Oh, no. They are drunk with the wine of the wrath of God, and they propose to make everybody else equally sodden and incapable of thought. I can imagine, quite easily, a state of society, right here in America, that would no longer coerce the poor and the incompetent and the weak and the unfit into procreation by laws against birth control. I can even imagine our getting to the point, quite soon, where we would see the unwisdom of legally tricking paupers, congenital cripples, the congenitally insane, epileptics and sufferers from venereal disease, into reproducing their kind to fill the jails, prisons, asylums and poorhouses, of which we are now building more and more every year. Yes, I can imagine even that idea sinking in before long. And there are lots of other things I can imagine. Some of them I have explained at length in this book and in The Revolt of Modern Youth. 5. It appears to me that nothing I have suggested passes the bounds of reason. I have not pictured a utopia, nor have I said that such social changes would produce one. What I have urged is simply the minimum of change necessary to decent and fruitful living. In fact, most of it is already within the reach of well-to-do, educated people who order their lives with reasonable wisdom and courage. By right education and certain changes of custom, it could be brought within the reach of all. Occasionally I get a letter from some social reformer asking why I have passed over without mention some social remedy which he thinks would transform society. My answer is that the first step is to see to it that children are well born and that they spend their early years in homes where they can grow and thrive. Further, that if we were all well, strong, intelligent and happy, many of the social remedies proposed for the betterment of our social and economic lot would be as unnecessary as poorhouses would be if there were no paupers. I don't want to make this too sweeping. I know that there are many strong, courageous and intelligent 396 persons who get crushed, often by sheer chance and bad luck, in the wheels of society. I know that we shall sooner or later have to devise ways of salvaging such persons and putting them on their feet. But that does not invalidate the broad truth of my contention, that a very large portion of the misery in the world would disappear if we could all be well born, strong, intelligent and reasonably happy, and that people who are well born usually manage to attain the other essentials. It is the weaklings, the ill-born, who go under. It seems silly, does it not, to produce them by law. 6. Some have called me a dreamer and a visionary. But I am not. I am a very practical person, as my record in Denver shows. And I have had a very practical purpose in mind in the writing of this book. That purpose is to convince as many people as possible that they do really and consciously want certain changes, or something approximately like them. If you can make a man want a thing, really want it, he will take care of the rest and will move heaven and earth to get it. The day is coming when enough people in this country are going to want these decent and reasonable essentials of living, this minimum I have pictured, and when they consciously want it they will get it. That will be a gain. One more rise will have been surmounted, one more summit attained. I am not asking much. These are the foothills of achievement. Beyond lie the mountains.